Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this CAFII webinar with Marlena Lebrieniec, Director of Innovation, Financial Services, Regulatory Authority of Ontario, or FSRA. My name is Keith Martin, and I am Co-Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Financial Institutions and Insurance, or CAFII. On behalf of myself and my Co-Executive Director colleague, Brendan Wicks, and the CAFII Board of Directors, thank you for joining our webinar today. CAFII is a not-for-profit industry association dedicated to the development of an open and flexible insurance marketplace. Our 15 members include the insurance arms of Canada's major banks and credit unions, along with their insurer business partners, which underwrite credit protection insurance and travel insurance. This is the final offering in our 2021 series of webinars, which have been focused primarily on issues related to life and health insurance policy and regulation in Canada. Now, today's webinar will be recorded and posted on our CAFII website in the near future. If during the webinar you have any questions, which we welcome, that you would like to pose to Marlena during the Q&A session, please send them to me as the host using the Q&A function of Zoom, and I will pose them on your behalf. Unless you specifically request in your question that you be identified as its source, I will pose all questions to Marlena on an anonymous basis. And just before we get underway, I want to extend a special welcome to some VIP guest attendees. In addition to many representatives from our 15 CAFII member companies and from our 10 associate members, which supply essential services to our association and its members. We have attendees as well today from allied industry associations, such as the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association and the Travel Health Insurance Association, and from insurance and financial services regulators and policymakers from across Canada, including the following: Quebec's Autorité des Marchés Financiers, or the AMF, the Ministry of Finance, Government of Quebec, the Alberta Auto Insurance Rate Board, the government of the Alberta Treasury Board and Finance, Government of Alberta, the Alberta Insurance Council, several of Marlena's colleagues from the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, or FSRA, the Financial and Consumer Services Commission of New Brunswick, or FCNB, the Insurance Councils of Saskatchewan, the Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority, Government of Saskatchewan, or FCAA, the Insurance Council of British Columbia, the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, or BCFSA, the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, or FCAC, and the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, or OSFI. Welcome to you all. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest Fireside chat discussant, Marlena Lebrieniec. Marlena is the Director of FSRA's Innovation Office. She has helped launch the Innovation Office over the past 2 years and leads the innovation team. The role of the Innovation Office is to collaborate with the best and brightest financial sector entrepreneurs and businesses in Ontario to encourage experimentation, promote innovative thinking, and explore ways to attract and retain investment. Its overarching goal is to help ensure that Ontario becomes a leader in financial innovation in Canada and around the world. Prior to joining FSRA, Marlena was a strategy and transformation leader in the financial services, consumer packaged goods, life sciences, and smart energy industries, with over 15 years of career experience to date. Marlena has worked with clients in North America and Europe and has a strong track record of success in driving strategic alignment across international organizations while supporting large-scale transformations. Her career highlights thus far include streamlining operations for Coca-Cola across Europe, leading outsourcing initiatives for Zurich Insurance in Europe and North America, overseeing a smart meter rollout in BC, and leading the Caribbean banking transformation strategy for one of Canada's major banks. Marlena also had the opportunity to manage a customer experience and innovation team for one of the largest life and health insurance companies in Canada, where she was responsible for identifying new product solutions and opportunities, including fintech partnerships. Now, just before we launch into today's webinar with Marlena, We are also very pleased to be able to invite Glenn Padisieri, Executive Vice President, Policy and Chief Consumer Officer at Fisra, and Marlena's boss, to share with us his vision for the Innovation Office. Glenn, we're delighted to have you with us today. Over to you.
Thanks, Keith, and thank you, Brendan. And on behalf of Fisra, we wanted to just express our gratitude for the ongoing collaboration and partnership we've had with CAFII. So we're really excited about the opportunity to be able to speak at this event and sort of share our information and hopefully get some mutual learning from the parties that are here, as well as with Fisra and what we can share. So just in terms of some opening remarks, and I promise I'll be brief, but because I think you're here for the star of the show, Marlena, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Fisra and our vision for innovation and how it sort of intersects with everything that we're doing. So if we take a step back for a moment, when the regulator was created back in 2019, there were two very important distinctions among many other things. And one was to set up what is known as the standalone office of the consumer, or the consumer office. And that was really to focus on embedding the consumer perspectives throughout our organization, whether it's our guidance or our rules or supervisory actions. The other was really to set up an office of innovation. Really pleased that Marlena is leading the team, and what she's here to do is really focus on how, as a regulator, we can support new products and services to enter the Ontario market and really support economic development and growth. So from a regulator viewpoint, we know that some of our laws or rules are very rigid and prevent new business models from entering the market. And that sometimes also discourages sectors from innovating because they don't see a need to. And from a geography standpoint, businesses, for the most part, want to know that they're playing with a common set of rules wherever they work, or at least look at having a minimum set of standards that they have to abide by. So when we're looking at Ontario, we also want to think nationally and internationally at how we approach these topics. And I think what I wanted to just underscore with all of that is, with the Consumer Office and the Innovation Office, they're not mutually exclusive, as in they're both intended to coexist and support one another to further our legislative objects, our mandate, and our mission. When we think about the Innovation Office, similar to the Consumer Office, it was created in early 2020. And so innovation is really a shared objective. It's led by Marlena and her team, but it's owned by everyone at Fisra. And it's sort of like an orchestrator model. It conducts activities on behalf of the entire organization, but utilizes everyone in the organization to get our work done. And we're still at a very early stage of our internal innovations journey. Marlena is going to talk about that journey. I think some of those points may be worth repeating, which include the creation of our inaugural innovation strategy, which we actually based on what we learned from others who are already out in this space in other jurisdictions, including other types of regulators, plus talking to key stakeholders that we work with, including the existing sectors that we regulate, consumers, and emerging businesses like startups. Marlena is going to talk to you a little bit about our test and learn environment, which is based on some really foundational principles. What's good for you is good for others. If we bring forward something for testing, it's going to be open for all. We're not prioritizing new entrants versus existing incumbents. Everyone has opportunities, and we'll work to ensure they are properly assessed and prioritized. We want to encourage dialogue. Really, this is about coming to talk to us. We'll work with you on your needs and how we can help. We don't know if we have all the answers, but we're committed to helping you to figure out where to go. And then finally, protecting the public interest. I never want to lose sight of this. We're always first and foremost a regulator, and we want to make sure that the public interest is always in mind with everything that we do. Again, Marlena has been leading the charge on this within our organization, really helping us to see the forest from the trees and helping us look at problems in new ways. I'm excited for her to be able to share that vision with you, and I really hope this is the start of an ongoing dialogue with everyone to share in our innovation journey. I think I'll stop here and hand the reins back to our star of the show, Marlena. And again, thank you for the opportunity to participate. And I hope there's great learnings all around. Back to you, Keith.
Thanks very much, Glenn. That was excellent. Much appreciated. Well, Marlena, let's jump right into it. Glenn spoke about the innovation orchestrator model, and that's a very interesting conceptually. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, Keith, and the CAFII team. So the orchestrator model that Glenn alluded to, we believe best positions the Innovation Office to manage and coordinate a portfolio of initiatives across FSRA, while of course leveraging the knowledge and resources of our core regulatory teams and other business areas across the organization to make sure that we meet our near-term innovation needs. The orchestrated model was really structured to help integrate many internal and external stakeholders at various points of the innovation process. We recognized that there was a need for a centralized coordination of initiatives across the agency, where we're able to make cross-sector connections and align innovation opportunities more efficiently. We're also able to prioritize work and manage the project pipeline based on overall FSRA innovation ambition, balance resource capacity, and ensure there's clear ownership and decision-making along the innovation process. It also allows us to expand our risk appetite, Keith, and remove some of the internal roadblocks to innovation that Glenn spoke to. As Glenn said, our innovation ambition is mutually owned by the organization, but the Innovation Office really acts as a point of contact and orchestrated within the agency to help move things along and manage that relationship between internal teams and external stakeholders. So maybe I'll just quickly say what that means for innovators. I think that for new market entrants seeking to pursue innovation, it is an opportunity to come directly to the Innovation Office as their first point of contact or entry to collaborate with FSRA. I also recognize that regulated entities seeking to pursue innovation opportunities have already established point of contacts within the organization. It is not to eliminate those, but to give them also an option to come forward to the Innovation Office with any potential opportunities or innovations they would like to address with us directly.
And that's very interesting, Marlena, because clearly for this sort of initiative, process matters and communication matters. And I know something in your innovation framework document that was spoken about is inside out and outside in points of entry. And maybe you could elaborate a bit on the difference between the two and what that means.
Of course. So we created the inside out and outside in approach to help us manage both opportunities that are identified internally, but of course, our goal is not to dictate innovation, and we wanted to ensure that we bring that outside-in approach into the organization. So a little bit more specifically, Keith and everyone on the call, the inside-out approach is not about how innovation in the financial services will occur, but really focuses on how FSRA can better support innovators using our regulatory tools. The goal is to leverage the expertise and insights of our teams across the agency, as well as Ministry of Finance, to ensure that we're using full suite of regulatory tools and approaches while we exercise regulatory discretion in a manner that, of course, values and incentivizes financial services innovation within the province, ensuring also that our consumers and public at large are protected from the potential risk of innovation. The outside-in approach really focuses on engagement with the sectors, allowing us to ensure that we have an open line of communication and are able to surface trends, concerns, and potential solutions that are being raised within our sectors, and bring that external perspective inside the organization. Bringing the outside-in and outside-in approach allows us to be a lot more aware and conclusive as we try to better understand how to support innovation within the sectors.
Well, thank you for that, Marlena. And I do want to mention that in the invite to this webinar, a document that has been published by FSRA on its preliminary approach to innovation is available. There's a link to it. It's called All Together Now, FSRA, the Innovation Office, and an Innovation Framework for a More Innovative Ontario Financial Services Sector. So I do recommend that if you want to delve into even more detail on some of these important points Marlena is making. And in that document, there's an outline of what's called the 5-step innovation process. Could you share that with us and give us a little more detail on that, Marlena?
Of course. So the five-step innovation process is really an extension of some of the points that I was making earlier in regards to standardization and making sure that internally we're able to not only manage innovation opportunities that are being raised, but also assess them quite efficiently and effectively, and we're not in any way a roadblock for the sectors. The innovation process was designed to help standardize and coordinate the pursuit of innovation within the sectors. We created the process to help us manage and deliver on innovation opportunities in a more organized and structured manner. Key elements of the process, and as Keith, you mentioned, further details could be found in our innovation framework that has been posted on our site, as well as on our innovation site under the FSRA main page. But the five-stage process focuses on opportunity intake, where we're looking at opportunities that are being brought to us. Of course, prioritization and management, where we're able to assess, prioritize, and select these opportunities based on established criteria. It focuses also on opportunity definition and solutioning, where we further validate and assess what regulatory tools we should be using to help address the specific opportunity. Risk assessment and testing really focuses on ensuring that, of course, we're looking at responsible innovation, and from a consumer perspective, the consumer is still protected, as well as looking at what tools will be required to potentially test and pilot this opportunity through our environments, like the test and learn environment that was mentioned at the beginning of this discussion. And lastly, it focuses on communication and measurement. And the goal is, of course, that we want to make sure that as we engage with stakeholders, we are able to measure through consumer, sector, and regulatory benchmarks on the success of the solutions that we're deploying.
That's excellent, Marlena. Thank you. That might be a good moment for us to do our first poll. Marlena, we are going to ask our participants, our audience members, to share some of their thoughts with us. So I'm going to launch the first poll. And the question is, on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 denotes very insignificant and 5 denotes very significant, at this time, how significant a barrier are regulatory requirements to your firm's ability to introduce innovations in products, services, or distribution methods? So you need to just pick 1. So please go ahead. And in a few moments, I'll close the poll and I'll share the results, and we'll ask Marlena to comment. We'll just give people a few more seconds to enter their poll answers, and then we'll share the results. Okay, excellent. So let's take a look at the results, which I'll now share. So nobody said it was very insignificant or somewhat insignificant. 11% felt it was neither. 68%, Marlena, feel it's somewhat significant. 21% feel it's very significant. Does that sound like the sort of results that you're expecting?
I think so, Keith. I think that, the fact that, that I would like to probably better understand the somewhat significant and understand how we could then better shift that scale to the significant, of course. But I think it is what is expected, given that we haven't even started implementing any of this yet, right? Like, it is still very much theory-based. Until we start implementing, I think that once we have some success from an implementation perspective, we're able to drive value for the sectors and the public. I would believe those results would shift. So I think it is expected for where we are right now in our journey.
Okay, excellent. Marlena, I also wanted to ask you about the intake form that is a standardized starting point for input to FSRA. So if you're an innovator and you want to take advantage of the innovation office, can you tell us how that process works and that step in terms of the form?
Right. So Keith, the form has shared for those, again, on the call, the form has been shared in our innovation framework consultation paper and will be shared on our innovation website on the FSRA's main page. But it was really to help us standardize the input point to coming to FSRA through the conversations. And we've been having a lot of conversations with innovators across our various sectors. We recognize to ensure that we're engaging the right people, bringing the right people across FSRA to the table to help assess the opportunities, that we have a good understanding of those innovation opportunities. It is important to ensure that we also outline what is required for those innovators, the information that is required from those innovators in order for us to, again, efficiently and effectively address each opportunity. We recognize that, you know, it could be somewhat potentially inhibiting or on the information that is required from an innovator. It requires them to provide a little bit more at the front, but from a process perspective, from an assessment perspective, it makes things more efficient from a long-term view. Through the public consultations, we have gotten great feedback on the intake form, and recognizing that it will help us, including the innovators, think through the information that is required across the various inputs to ensure that they also come prepared to the discussions and the opportunity presented. There was, through the consultations, and maybe I could bring it up here, some concerns about potentially disclosing proprietary information and how we will use that information from a transparency perspective and ensure that it is potentially shared with others. But I just wanted to make sure that no way will FSRA be sharing any proprietary information through this form. It is for internal purposes to ensure that we have a good understanding of ideas being presented, to ensure that internally we have the right people at the table to assess.
And let me connect this to the other concept that's in this section of your document, which is innovator readiness. What does that mean? Right,
and so that is a very good connection point, Keith. We recognize that there are regulatory challenges, of course, associated with innovation, and we wanted to make sure that we're not responding in a wait to see approach, but test and learn one. And but that also means that innovators' readiness is a key component in this. We want to make sure that often as innovators build the systematic ability, and what I mean by systematic ability is the underlying processes and capabilities to support that innovation idea, that they're also able to transform those ambitious transformation into results when they come to us and actually present it. So it is key to ensure that these ideas being put forward present a need and readiness for testing, demonstrate that the product or the service is ready to be tested in a live market, within a live or controlled environment as our test and learn environment.
And I know related to this is a sort of risk assessment. I think it's a 5-step risk assessment process that you work with innovators on. Can you tell us a bit about that risk assessment process? And I know some of our members have raised that financial institutions are by their nature risk assessors. They're experts in risk assessment. So is the fact that they are willing to engage in this innovation not already indicating that they feel that the risk is worth taking? And where does your FSRA risk assessment fit into that?
Right. So when we're looking at a risk assessment, Keith, here, I just want to make sure that, you know, in our drive to facilitate responsible innovation, in, of course, our financial services sector, the responsible aspect of the mission is as bit as critical, or every bit as critical as the innovation aspect. So while there's a risk is a fundamental component of all innovation, it could never be fully avoided. And as Glenn mentioned at the beginning of his presentation, it's our role to make sure that there's prudent and responsible efforts taken to ensure that innovation-based risk is recognized and mitigated. How we will do that, Keith? It is through open lines of communication and transparency with the innovator. So it is not for us to make it in any way more difficult, but it's to be fully transparent and understand the potential risks that are associated with that specific innovation, both, of course, and assess it both from a regulatory perspective, but also from a consumer perspective. And specific risks will be integrated to the test and learn environment to ensure that risk isn't transferred from companies to consumers, which is a consumer concern. So the scope of these restrictions will depend, of course, on the type of products, the business models and technologies being considered. But the goal is to ensure that there's full transparency and open lines of communications around it. And we recognize that it's a balance, right? Like we don't want to for sure don't want to make it in any way that this risk framework or risk approach will any way hinder the efficiency of us moving quickly and ensuring that there's also agility built into our process, because we don't want to hinder in any way. We don't want that process and risk assessment to hinder innovation in any way.
So that's a very good point. And in connection with this, you have strong testable migration plans for any significant risks that are identified. Tell us how that will work.
Sir, can you repeat the question because it cut off for me, Keith?
Sure. The importance of strong testable mitigation plans for any significant risks identified.
Right. So it is very much, off what I've just mentioned around being fully transparent and keeping the line of communication open between us and the innovators, and understanding if there are risks identified, that there is mitigation plans in place to ensure that, again, that risk is not in any way transferred, for example, from a company to the consumer. So the goal is, it comes down to being transparency and openness.
All right, thank you for that. Marlena, I want to mention something that we did make in our submission to the draft document on the innovation framework, which was that the standard to which the innovation office should be held is not perfection. It's not that every innovation is adopted by the marketplace or by consumers, because innovation by its nature is risky, and not everything, or in fact probably a majority of innovations don't end up being successful, but that doesn't mean the process doesn't work. So I want to mention that we emphasize that because we think it's important that your efforts be held to the appropriate standard and not an artificial and an unrealistic one. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Of course. Thanks for sharing that, Keith. I completely agree with you. And I often say, as many probably of the participants on this webinar know, that do address innovation opportunities and work within this environment, that the journey is not linear. Often it is very much a winding road with a lot of bumps, but the importance is, and that approach has been reflected in innovation framework, is to be able to be agile enough to quickly course correct and learn. As I say, even with our own test and learn environment, as we open the doors to our test and learn environment in January, we were testing and learning as we go. So it is a matter of now focusing and making sure that we start implementing, we learn from the implementation, and we course correct as need be. Very similarly with the innovation framework, I say it's an open live document that we're testing and deploying. So recognizing that it's not 100% right. I would say maybe it's 80% there, but we're focused on moving now from theory into practice, and that will take, that should allow for mistakes, but more importantly, it's how quickly we'll be able to course correct and change direction based on the feedback that we get. And we're in the process of crawling. I hope that we'll be able to run very quickly, walk, I should say, not even run, but walk very quickly, but it just takes time, right? So as we crawl, we'll learn to walk, and then we'll be ready to run.
Right, as the expression goes, it's where the rubber hits the road. And I know in business, there's an expression around innovation that you want to fail quickly. In other words, you don't always succeed, but you need to quickly learn about whether or not something has a real shot at making a go of it. So Marlena, I just want to remind attendees that they're welcome to pose questions through the Q&A function of Zoom. And before we go into the next section of this webinar, which is about test and learn environments, we have several questions from the audience, and I thought we'd just take a pause and pose them to you and get your thoughts. And many of these are connected to things you have raised or will raise around the test and learn environments, or TLEs. But I think it would be interesting to sort of cite them now and hear what your thoughts are. And the first is, how do you prioritize the innovation initiatives that will be brought to you? What factors do you plan to use to prioritize these innovations?
So of course, that will be sector by sector specific, Keith, and ensure it has to align with our own business priorities as well, and the core objectives of the core regulatory teams. But we want to make sure that we're able to assess innovation and opportunities that are of immediate need or impact from a sector perspective, or something that it is disruptive, and it is something that we need to be aware of, but does not require potentially immediate action. A lot of opportunities that we're focusing on is around where we have our own questions to inform policy making. We're also observing and seeing what's happening in other jurisdictions, and what's taking priority there, being mindful that they could also transition into Ontario, and what that would mean for Ontario. So it's a combination of considerations that we're taking into prioritization, but of course also engagement with the sectors. We've been hosting several roundtables to better understand where the sector wants to see the innovation go, what are some of the priorities from a sector perspective, and use that as a tool to help us guide where we should be focusing. So it is very much an internal perspective, observing what others are doing in other jurisdictions, as well as focusing very much on our own sector participants here and understanding where their priorities lie.
That's very helpful. I have another question from the audience, Marlena, which is, how were innovations previously handled by you as a regulator, and what prompted this new approach?
So great question. I started in 2020 when I started this office. So this is probably a great question for Glenn, and my apologies. I'm not sure if Glenn is still on the phone or on the line. I'm sure he is. He could speak to that. But I think, just looking more broadly, we've seen impact and change within the financial services sector, the need for the regulator to respond to the changing needs of consumers as well as technology. And I think by nature, this is something that that could not be ignored and without a doubt be adopted by a regulatory body.
Well, thank you. And a related question, how open is FSRA to join informal conversations early on in the process with startups and insurers? Very
open. So I think this is where, and we've been doing so organically. Focus for next year is to definitely engage more proactively with startups and fintechs and insurtechs. We've been doing so through organizations like Fintech Cadence, as an example, and Mars, where we've been talking to a lot of startups within the space and better understanding what they're trying to accomplish and where they're seeing regulatory friction and prohibition in order for their innovations to move forward.
Thank you, Marlena. That's very helpful. Let's talk now a bit about test and learn environments, or TLEs. So let's start with the role of regulatory sandbox like TLEs in resolving uncertainty through experimentation and in improving or clarifying identified risks sufficiently for innovations which initially might generate a low or medium level of FSRA confidence. Can you talk to us about that and how these TLEs could help in that in that process?
Right. So Keith, we mentioned as part of the framework and earlier in our conversation that the TLE, the test and learn environment, is one of the tools that we're looking at to help inform regulatory response and policy response, specifically around some of the innovations that we're seeing within the sectors. It is a data-driven tool that we're building to help us better understand how certain innovations are performing within a controlled environment. So not only can we learn and better understand what this means from a policy perspective, but also from a consumer perspective. It allows us to collaboratively work with the innovators on these opportunities, and also allows the innovator to benefit and better understand how these opportunities or potential innovations fit within the current regulatory environment, or what that would mean from a future perspective, and how we should be course correcting or impacting that in the future.
Well, that's helpful. Tell us a little bit more about how they actually work. Like what are the mechanics of it?
Of course. So it focuses on, there are two test and learn environments that we're looking at, but I think for simplicity perspectives, I'll focus on the test and learn environment that we're launching in January. And as I said, it's our test and learn of our test and learn. So recognizing that it is a pilot, and we wanted to make sure that we keep it within limited scope. So as we're deploying, we're also learning and understanding then how do we more effectively scale. It focuses on exemptive authority as the main legal tool to support innovation. So across various categories where we've been granted exemptive authority, we'll be able to utilize that and exempt companies for a period of time, so we could test these opportunities within a controlled environment and be better informed of what that means from a policy perspective, and what that would mean for how we could best inform regulatory recommendation and action post the test.
That's very helpful. And there's a fee structure, right, Marlena?
We're exploring a fee structure. So there's no, the fee structure is not currently part of the test and learn environment. We are a self-funded regulator that operates on a cost recovery basis. And the current FSRA fee rule does not allow for this type of fee to be charged, but we are exploring and consulting on this as part of the innovation framework, as well as the guidance that we'll be issuing on our test and learn on what that could look like in the future. And of course, this focuses on both the regulated and sector entities that were and what that would look like from a fee perspective for them, and for the startups that are currently maybe not regulated by us, but would want to participate within the test and learn environment.
So you've got a quite robust process. You have an intake form, you have the test and learn environments, but in the end, there's a decision. There's a go or no-go decision. So is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
And so
like with any test.
And so there'll be situations where you may say, no, we don't feel that this is something that fits in with this with this innovation office approach, or it's not one of our priorities right now.
So it's not even Keith, with an innovation approach or priorities. It's a matter of the outcome of the test and the benefit that it's driving to the public. Because in the end, we want to make sure that there's a clear benefit from a consumer perspective, and it delivers on the right outcomes from a consumer perspective. So that is the main focus of the test, to ensure that there's a clear benefit to the public. The no-go decision will be based on such factors to ensure that there is no risk to the sector and to the public.
Well, thank you. Well, having discussed test and learn environments, Marlena, I think this would be a good moment for us to go to our second poll, which I'm now going to launch. And this is on A question to the audience members: on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 denotes very unlikely and 5 denotes very likely, how likely is your firm to pursue an innovation testing opportunity through the FSRA Innovation Framework's regulatory sandbox-like test and learn environments? So please answer the question as soon as you can. I'll keep it open for a minute or so, and then we'll see what the answers are. So we'll just keep the poll open for a few more seconds. Please, please offer your views. We're interested in your feedback. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. And Marlena, what we're seeing here is that fully 40% of participants feel that it's somewhat likely or very likely that they will use this test and learn environment. I'm not surprised that a good 40% plus are not certain, or neither likely nor unlikely, because it's a new process, and I think people are still learning about it and probably thinking about it. Are you also not surprised by these results?
No, I'm not, Keith. And I think very similarly to the first poll, I think that, again, it's a matter of first driving value and showing benefit of such a tool. And then, of course, I feel there's an opportunity then to build engagement and trust into what has been built. And of course, also a level of interest. And I think what's interesting for me, or where I would maybe like to better understand, is it neither likely or unlikely because they're not seeing limitations or friction from a regulatory perspective in what they're trying to achieve? Or is it because, again, the process is unknown and it's so new, and further understanding needs to happen? So I think there are two probably sides to that answer that I would like to better understand, but the results are not surprising.
I think it's encouraging if 40% are thinking that they would likely use these services. That's still a quite significant sort of positive response, I think.
Right, and I think that in the end, of course, it is built to both for the benefit of both us as an agency, but of course the sector as well. So understanding that of maybe what's prohibiting potential applicants or those not interested in the test and learn environment will be interesting. And I think that this is the important piece of that. As we open the lines of communication and engagement within the sectors, and as we deploy, we'll be able to continue to revise and build of what we've started to ensure that it is well suited for all potential participants.
Thank you, Marlena. We have a couple of questions from the audience that I'd like to ask. One is related to the fee structure that you clarified as being considered. And the question is, do regulators elsewhere in the world, in other jurisdictions in other parts of the world, charge for the use of their sandboxes? We've
seen both. So when we're looking at assessing the fee rule, we talked to a number of regulators, including FCA, who's the pioneer of the regulatory sandbox. We've also talked to World Bank and the team there that focuses on just sandboxes and understanding sandboxes and the potential, not even best, but just understanding sandboxes and the processes required to ensure that it is a successful outcome and tool. We've seen both. There is no clear, we've seen both. And I think that this is what we're exploring as part of the consultations. We want to make sure that in the end, when we're looking at charging this fee, it is also being mindful that because we're an orchestrator model and we're highly dependent on colleagues across the agency, we're able to tap into resources that are then or not fully, but are partially focused on assessing these opportunities and contributing their time to for the TLE or a review of the potential intake forms with opportunities being presented.
All right, thank you very much for that, Marlena. Here's another question about the test and learn environments. The question is, where an innovation tested through the TLE is successful, what level of commitment have you received from the government of Ontario, around making the necessary permanent changes to the Insurance Act or a regulation under that act to allow that innovation to continue? And what process will FSRA follow in engaging the government in promoting such changes? Right.
So we have a very collaborative and, again, open relationship with the Ministry of Finance. I think throughout the process, what we've built and ensured that there is transparency on the outcomes of the test, and we're able to prove the value of such a product or business model through data. What we've done is also ensure that as we're looking and still fully building out the exit strategy, that at the end of the test, the 2-year term that we currently have for the auto, there's a potential extension for additional 2 years to allow us to ensure that from a regulatory perspective, as we work with MOF, the proposed changes can take place. So we're looking at different options to ensure, as part of the exit strategy, that the innovator in any way is not left hanging, and there are solutions in place from a process perspective, because it is a process, to ensure that they could continue to deploy such a product or business model post-test period before there are changes made.
Marlena, before we go to the next question from the audience, I'm going to just correct something I said earlier. I said that I thought it was encouraging that a full 40% in poll number 2 said that they would use the test and learn environments, but my math skills have to improve. It's 29% said somewhat likely, 21% said very likely, so that's actually 50%. So a full half of participants said that they would seriously consider using the service from FSRA. So that's, I would think, very encouraging number, quite a positive result. Marlena, we have a question from the audience about whether you could share examples of innovations that you have seen in other jurisdictions or industries that you think may be coming to the insurance industry in Ontario. And I know we talk a lot about artificial intelligence, about machine learning, about digitization. So these are all areas I would suspect might be possible candidates.
Right. So we've been exploring AI, of course. We looked at opportunities around digitization, and when we talk about digitization across the life cycle of engagement, either from a consumer perspective or these are not maybe net new opportunities, or disruptive opportunities. I think some of them are table stakes that we just have not seen come up within our sector, mainly because of maybe how difficult it is again to move through the regulatory hurdles, or innovators not making it, or companies not making it a priority. But it is the use of AI, Keith, that we're looking at and trying to better understand in decision making from a consumer perspective, and also looking at more digitized, fully digitalized business models where we're not seeing agents being involved, that we've seen in Europe as an example.
Okay, excellent. And let me ask you just to speak a little bit more about this balance that you're speaking about, which I think is probably the biggest challenge for a regulator like FSRA. I mean, there's so many areas in which you have to balance sort of competing initiatives or efforts or priorities. And in this particular case, can you tell us about the balance between incumbents and new market entrants, and how you sort of try to be fair to both?
Right. So I think it's a given that the composition of growth for companies is changing across our sectors. You know, historically, and more established companies, growth for them came on the back of geographical expansion or category penetration, or even diversification of new product launches. But really, in my mind, and based on what I've seen, I feel like it very rarely came from true innovation. And sector landscape naturally has changed significantly over the 5-10 years when we're looking at the emergence of e-commerce, social media, of course, new technologies and digital solutions. So as these two primary factors are reshaping the sector dynamics, where we're looking at emergence of sector or startups, fintechs and insurtechs within the sectors. Of course, fast changing consumer preferences. We want to make sure that we create supportive policy environment that gives a level playing field for both upcoming startups and businesses, but of course also the established market players.
All right, excellent. That's very helpful. And Marlena, just one point of clarification. I know in speaking to you that this whole initiative, whole innovation framework will definitely be accessible to life and health insurance, but it's my impression that in auto insurance you've started a little further ahead there, and you've this process has sort of been tested initially in that sector. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it is accessible for all. The innovation framework addresses all the sectors equally, and the tools that we are built are tools that are to support all the sectors and all the sector players. Sorry, my dog is in the background. Yeah, but you're right, Keith. As I said, we needed to pilot somewhere. And where we said, okay, well, if we're, as part of the pilot, we focus on the auto insurance for the test and learn environment. In pair, we're looking at what does that mean for other sectors, and how do we quickly scale across all other sectors to support them in this with this tool as well.
And you're pleased with some of the initial learnings from the auto sector?
So we're just starting with the auto sector, Keith. Our door to the test and learn environment is opening up on January 1st. And we'll be starting to take applications as of that date for our test and learn. So we don't have key learnings yet. Hopefully they'll be, within the next 6 months or a year, I will be able to share a little bit more.
All right, well, we should have you back and hear what you've learned. We're nearly at the end of our hour, Marlena. It's just flown by. It's been extremely interesting. We have one final poll that we'd like to ask our audience members to share their views on. So I'm going to open it now. And the question is, on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is very unhelpful and 5 is very helpful, how helpful do you feel the FSRA Innovation Framework will be to supporting innovation in Ontario's financial services sector? So please offer us your thoughts, and we'll share the results with everyone in a few moments. So we'll just keep the poll open a few more moments, so please give us your thoughts. Okay, Marlena, I'll share the results now. A couple of people said it was very unhelpful or somewhat unhelpful, but the vast majority, 82%, I think my math is correct this time, said that it's somewhat helpful or very helpful. So I would assume you find that encouraging.
Yes, Keith, I think that I do, and I'm happy to begin the lines and open lines of collaboration and communication with your members, as well as, of course, with your organization, on how we could better support and how we could more effectively support the sector with innovation opportunities and with our framework. I think now it's, as I said, it is a theory document that we're going to be implementing and deploying, and I think that over time we'll be able to drive some impactful results and value from it.
Marlena, I will ask the two individuals who felt it's very unhelpful or somewhat unhelpful to, if they're comfortable doing so, email my co-executive director, Brendan Wicks, and myself with their reasons, and we'll share them with you anonymously, because I think, you know, we'd be interested to hear why they feel this is not a process that they're fond of. And I know in speaking to you that you and your Fisra colleagues are very open to feedback and input, and we'll share what we learn.
Of course. Thanks so much, Keith. I think there would be great value in doing that. And I think also, just to be you know, fully transparent, I'm also open up for a discussion. As I said, our innovation framework has closed for consultations, but if there's anything that individuals on this forum may have that will benefit the framework or our approach, I'm all ears. So I would love to hear, Keith, if not through you, I'm happy to address potential concerns or opportunities directly.
Excellent. Well, we are going to send a thank you to the participants in today's call, and we'll include your email address so that they can communicate directly with you as well if they so desire. So, Marlena, thank you so much again. Any final thoughts before we close off this webinar?
No final thoughts from me, Keith. I just wanted to thank you and your organization for having me and letting me speak to the innovation framework. As I said, I urge and encourage everyone to review it, and as a lot of what we've spoken to earlier today is very much in detail reflected in the framework. So if there are any additional questions coming out of that or the comments, feel free to reach out to my office directly, and I'm happy to open the lines of communication and engagement.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that, Marlena, and thank you again for participating today. It was very much appreciated. And to all the attendees, we very much appreciated your participation as well, and all the excellent questions. So I'll close off this CAFII webinar at this time, and would like to offer everyone a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.